The extent to which Democrats think the Democratic brand is broken is pretty stunning to me. And we have a bunch of new polling data out lately that I want to go through that kind of explains where the Democratic Party is. Because I spend a lot of time on Donald Trump, and I think rightly so. He's president of the United States. He is pushing norms and boundaries in ways that we've never seen before across a million different avenues, right? But we have to remember there are two major parties in this country, not one. And the Democratic Party is in worse shape today, both in terms of how it's viewed by the general electorate, but also how Democrats feel about it, than at any time that I can remember in my covering of politics, which is now, because I'm old, almost 3 decades. All right, so let's go through a couple things. So first of all, Associated Press poll, national poll out on Thursday morning. Some of these numbers are stunning. They asked Democrats how optimistic or pessimistic they feel about their party's future. 1 in 3 Democrats, 33% of Democrats, said they are either very optimistic or even somewhat optimistic about their party's future. 33%, 1 in 3. Compare that to July 2024, when 6 in 10 Democrats said they felt either very or somewhat optimistic about their party's future. Now, I will note, July 2024 was when Democrats were in the midst of changing their nominee, right? Joe Biden had the debate. Kamala Harris was becoming we were debating what was going to happen. Biden gets out of the race July 21st. Kamala Harris gets into the race. Maybe you get a little of the excitement of switching from Biden to Harris in those numbers, but 6 in 10 Democrats, even in that moment, which was chaotic at a minimum, even in that moment said they were somewhat or very optimistic about the future of the party. Today, it is 1 in 3. And just by way of comparison, what percentage of Republicans feel very or somewhat optimistic about their party's future right now? A majority, 55%. So a huge delta there, both between where Democrats were in July of 2024 and where Republicans are today. Now, there's another set of data. So this is Puck, which is a newsletter site. They combined with Echelon Insights, great pollster. They have some of my favorite people over there, Kristen Soltis Anderson, Patrick Ruffini. They do really great work. It's a Republican firm, but they do really interesting work. So they got together, and Puck asked them to ask people, what one word comes to mind when you say the Democratic Party? And I always think these word association things are actually very useful. I think they're an interesting guide into sort of the brand of the two parties. You know, like, what's your brand association with Chick-fil-A or Coca-Cola or McDonald's, right? And I think those things are useful in the commercial world, but also in the political world. So they then built word clouds with the biggest words being the ones that were the most mentioned. So first of all, they did this among all voters, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. Here are the 3 words that were most mentioned when the pollster said, name one word that comes to mind when I say the Democratic Party. Liberal, weak, corrupt. Liberal, weak, corrupt. Obviously, that's not where you want to be as a party. But this is actually even more interesting, because remember I said even Democrats are not optimistic about their party and are down on their party, right? They then said, all right, let's ask the same question, but we'll just ask Democrats what one word comes to mind. And you would think it would be like fair or equal or something. Here was the number one word: weak. So weak was the number one word that Democrats associated with their party, and ineffective was right there as well. So liberal, weak, corrupt for the general electorate, and weak and ineffective for the just Democratic sample. I find that, I guess, not surprising, because we've had the Democratic brand in a place since Donald Trump won in 2024 that I've not seen before. We're in worse shape in terms of how people view it than I've ever seen before. I've talked to pollsters who've said they've sat in focus groups, and the words that keep coming up are weak and woke. So that weak word keeps coming up. And I think that is sort of a big problem for the Democratic Party. You can't be viewed as weak. Donald Trump's great strength, even for people who don't agree with him, is he's viewed as a fighter and tough. Now, we can debate whether he is a fighter and tough, but that's how he's viewed. And Democrats right now, even among themselves, see themselves as weak and ineffective. And I just think that's incredibly telling and problematic for a party. But it does suggest you know what you need to work on. You know, as you rebuild the party, as people start positioning for 2028, you know you need a fighter. You need someone who's perceived as tough, someone who's perceived as going to bat for you, someone who is perceived as willing to fight, not literally, but in the political sense. And so that's probably where Democrats need to start. But man, these numbers and those words, even for me who kind of knew that the Democratic brand was not in good shape, were pretty shocking. All right, everyone, I ask you to do just one thing for me. Just hit that subscribe button. It's free and it's easy, and it helps me out a ton, and it gets you good political content every single day. All right, everyone, take care.